Hello, I'm Sahana Singh, editor of Asian Water magazine. And today, when I saw environment listed as the topic of your lecture, I was hoping you would convey some sense of urgency about the need to curb carbon emissions, some urgency about preventing the global temperatures from rising out of control, but that did not happen. Are you underestimating the importance of environment? Are you thinking that technology is going to solve all the problems, the environmental problems created by energy generation?
I think it was pretty clear in my remarks. I talked about Kyoto and I talked about climate change as a fundamental driver. I think I listed it as the first driver was the drive for clean energy, and it's for environmental reasons. I think if we don't find technological answers, we're in really big trouble because the answers have to come from technology. I don't think the populations of the world, people who have low standards of living, are going to accept continuing to have low standards of living. They want economic growth. I think that's a fundamental demand, and the only way you really meet it is with technological innovation. And it's true, I'm a technological optimist. I think it's think about what's happened, and all the things that people didn't think would happen or even couldn't imagine. And now the application of this innovation. I'm on the Energy Advisory Board at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. 5 years ago, they didn't have an energy club for the students. Today, they have 1,200 students in the energy club. That means a lot of people who never thought about careers in energy in terms of innovation are now doing it. The ambassador from Brazil mentioned biofuels. 5 years ago, the thought that somebody who's doing a PhD in life sciences would find a career in energy was not something that they would have thought about, and yet today there is. So for me, my source of optimism or confidence, as I said, we won't know until we know, comes from the incredible concentration of resources in a way that we've never seen before. To just tell a story, in the 1990s, the Clinton administration asked me to head a task force on energy research and development for the US Department of Energy. And at that time, the first Gulf War was over. Everybody did not imagine the kind of growth that we'd see. Climate change was not yet on the political agenda. And so the whole thing is here, why should you spend any money on energy R&D? The problem isn't there. And so we worked for a year and a half on this report. We produced it. I think it was a good report. Nothing happened. Today, it is such a different circumstances, and I think we're still just building the momentum. And just as those people who went out and drilled for oil responded to a need, that's why they did it. The need is there today, and I think the response is ultimately going to be cumulatively global. And I think 10, 15 years from now, we'll be surprised by it.
Dan, you hit upon technology transfer, the importance of innovation, especially for, I've noticed, for developing countries. They need the technology, they need that killer app to cut greenhouse gas emissions, but it costs money. You need funding, you need investment. Hillary Clinton at the APEC meeting talked about this, talked about clean fund technology that the US is trying to promote for developing countries. Is that it? Is that what's really needed here? Commitment from developed countries that they will transfer technology and help fund the development of cleaner burning fuel technology for developing countries, because that's what's needed.
I think that's certainly part of it, and funding, the access to resources to make things happen is important. I think also it's kind of a global agenda, so I think it's not only resources flowing, but I think it's collaboration. Take Singapore, very high degree of scientific capability research. We need a kind of collaborative leveraging of resources. I mentioned, obviously, coal. This is a big issue between the US and China. 50% of US electricity is coal, 70% of China. Clean coal, it doesn't make sense to go in separate paths, but rather, again, to leverage resources. So I think it's not only the transfer, I think it's the collaboration.
Yes, there's a couple of questions in this over here. Let's take the gentleman just in the middle there.
Thank you. My name is Alec Walker. I'm starting with Shell in January in Houston, Texas. A couple quick questions. The first is, should we be predicting a rise in electric vehicles? And if so, what would the consequence be on the oil industry? And the second question is, I've heard a lot of rumors about the shift in the balance of power between the multinational oil companies and the national oil companies. And what's your opinion on that? Or should we be expecting some kind of major shift? Thank you.
Well, those are both big questions. You know, as I said, I go back sometimes to the pages of the prize because different things become relevant at different times. And so I went back, this was just about 2 months ago, and looked at the section about the rise of the internal combustion engine. Between about 1895 and 1910, there was a race between the electric car and the internal combustion engine. And finally, Henry Ford brought down production costs. It was more efficient, the energy density, and 1910, the race was over, or so we thought. Here we are in the year 2009, and the race is on again. In China, very big support for batteries. The U.S. administration making a big support for batteries. Automobile companies kind of reeling from the pressures, trying to figure out where the balance is. So I think, will we see more electricity in transportation? I think the answer is yes. The scale of it, well, I think it still depends upon, you know, the development of the batteries.
Could lithium be the next big commodity then, as this technology takes off?
You know, some see that and, you know, then look at the distribution of resources or look beyond lithium. You know, we know a company like BYD in China is at the forefront of battery research. There's A123 in the United States. It is a really hot area. So, you know, and as I said, we're developing our new global scenarios, and one of them looks at the question of, can we imagine Asia as an energy exporter in the form of batteries? And how would that work? Between the international oil companies, the so-called IOCs, and the NOCs, the national oil companies, you know, you often see in the headlines big oil, and that is meant to refer to the traditional oil companies whose names we all know, but they're actually pretty small when you compare them against the NOCs, who control about, the national oil companies, about 80% of the resources. So the balance, what the IOCs have is skills in managing and complexity of projects, being able to work around the world, in being able to marshal skills. So it's kind of a changing balance between them, and it's somewhat affected by what's happening with the price at every given point. But I think if talking about, was one of the things when I wrote the epilogue to the new edition of the prize, is a lot of the drama now is the relationship between the IOCs and the NOCs in the future.
Yes, there's a lady here who has a question.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Gaiman from the Nature Society. Dr. Yergin, in your wide-ranging speech, you have given quite a lot of emphasis to technological innovation, and indeed a lot of the questions from the floor are also on this issue. I do share your hope that technology will see us through all these challenges. But we all know that technology, well, first, technology is only as good or as bad as how we use it. And there also, especially now, is our economic constraints. I mean, where are we going to put our investments? You did mention some of the greatest innovations well, in the last decade, and you also talked quite a lot about energy efficiency, but some of the questions from the floor have indicated that a lot of technology is a double-edged sword. Nuclear was mentioned. Some of the environmental damages, food shortages from biofuels was mentioned. Can I just ask you, what do you see not as the most likely, but what do you consider the most ideal technological innovation that we can see that would solve all these problems that we are talking about: energy security, geopolitical security, environmental sustainability, economic volatility? Thank you.